Just this morning, I woke up early enough. I was having a cup of tea and I was looking at Reader's Digest, and there was an article about some very, very rambunctious politician in Texas who, among other things that he's done, he was a country music success, and he's Jewish, and he wrote a song called "They Don't Make Jews Like Jesus Anymore." And he also had another motto, which is I was very moved by. He said, "Anybody can swim in the mainstream. Hell, a dead fish can do that." And I started thinking about the reality of the life that we're living and the challenge that it poses. It had a certain set of challenges when, numbers 1 to 25 arrived here, whatever that might have been, and it had a certain sense of possibility. We were totally under the radar screen. We could do all kinds of things. They're just precluded now, can't be done anymore. We can talk and talk, and we love to talk about those extraordinary adventures, and they're very relevant because, just as Terry was saying, it does give you faith. And as Jyotish and Devi were saying so beautifully, it speaks of attunement and the power and the possibility of attunement. But on Monday, what Swami stood up here and said is we should found many communities, and many of you, I want you to go out and found communities. And I remember in those early years, one of the characteristics about life here was that Swamiji kept changing our jobs all the time. I had 7 jobs in 14 months once. I decided it was either because I just washed out so fast, they decided there was no point in leaving me there, which was to a large extent true. When Ananda said I ran the publications business, I leaned over to Fremont and said, "Into the ground." When Swami fired me from that job, which he did on a Friday, I said, "Sir, I recognize that this represents a major failure in my life, but I am so relieved to be out of this job. Why don't we not talk about it till Monday? And for 2 days, I'll just think that I just got away and I'm free." So for 2 days, I just celebrated the escape from karma. And then on Monday, I let him tell me all the reasons why he was firing me, which was not pretty, but that's all in the past. But he made a comment once at that time when we were, as Sadhana Devi generously describes it, a little unfocused. I remember I showed up for work, which started at 9 once. I showed up at 4:30. In the afternoon, Seva said, "Good morning, Asha. So nice of you to come in today." To me, it had been a straight line from getting up to getting there. I just really wasn't sure what happened in between, but a lot happened in between. But Swamiji's, I also remember when they built the publications building up there, and it was cold here in the winter then. We had really lots of snow. We opened the publications building in the fall, and which is now Hansa Temple, I walked all over the building really carefully, and then I came to Seva and I said, "Seva, there's no heater in this building. Have you noticed that?" She said, "Well, we just ran out of money." So we all would I had like a whole outfit that I would wear to work, not to get to work, but at work. We just sat there with down parkas, and we had these little tiny space heaters, and then the electricity would blow out, and they wouldn't work. But, all that it was just fun. Even at the time, it was fun, because we weren't swimming in the mainstream. Even a dead fish can do that. We used to joke that we were part of the lunatic fringe, even, which to me has always been a badge of honor. But in all that going on, Swami would remark once the reason, because it was very unstable to move people from job to job. It was very hard to progress any department when people were moving around all the time. But Swami said very seriously, many of you will have communities of your own someday, so you need to understand every aspect of it. And we just sort of said, "Wow, that sounds neat, You blow a big bubble, with your bubble gum. It was just like... But look, so when Swami looks out over this crowd, and he doesn't have as much time as he had before, so he has to speed things up a little bit. And he says, many of you will start communities. On one hand, yes, that means you should think very seriously about it, but don't think that means that you don't have to train for it. Don't think that means that just because he announced that the effort required, what you see up here, and you probably like it, I certainly find it just moving so I have to keep from weeping. You see the fruit of this life. And nobody got here. I mean, we are a little old now, and we're a little older than a lot of you out there, thank God. You know, there's a little youth on your side. But we just got here a step at a time. We didn't get here all at once. We just got here on a day-to-day basis, putting Dharma ahead of desire. Where there is Dharma, there is victory. That was all that we did, just put Dharma ahead of desire. We really didn't know where we were going. Swamiji said in the first years of Ananda, he used to tell people where Ananda was going, but he found instead of inspiring people, it frightened them. And I've seen sort of in the faces of some of the younger people who feel, well, maybe Swami wants us to start communities. There's also, and I respect you for it, a degree of fear in your faces, and there ought to be. Because this is a big job, this is really something to do. But you're thinking the fright comes because you think you have to go from here, and the next step is, and now I'm starting a community. No, the next step is to begin to expand your aura into whatever's next to you. When people ask me sometimes, what should I do? Should I move from one community to another? Should I do this? The question is, are you able 100% to serve God where you are? Is there a way? And I don't mean theoretically, I mean actually. What characterized the people who built Ananda is that we didn't hold back. We were a little crazy, but we just didn't hold back. My memories of Ananda, the word lope, which is the only word I can think of, he would lope through the garden barefoot. Just run from one end to, he was always too busy even to walk. He'd just run from one end of the garden to the other end of the garden. I mean, talk about energy. And no matter how early I came over the hill, Ananda was always there ahead of me with Dave Warner and others who were in Maria, of course. I mean, just all these people just working 100%. And that's really what it's about. It's you give yourself 100% to God for whatever God has asked you to do. And if there's nothing obvious, then be creative. And if you're not creative, then ask somebody else who is to help you understand what to do next. And just build your spine, your commitment, your faith, a step at a time by putting Dharma above desire. And what is our Dharma? Well, we're disciples. Now, that's not a small thing to become a disciple. And what is important to the Guru? I really don't think the Guru cares about your IRA or, the wallpaper in your house. I mean, it's nice to make things lovely. There's absolutely no reason not to. Swami actually had to teach us that it's nice to make things lovely. Because some of us had this very Kali Yuga concept that if it's ugly, we must be spiritual. But as he said, we have to make the environment as refined as our ideas, or people will not understand that we have serious ideas to offer them. Times have changed. We're way out of the era of the teepees that's not even appropriate anymore. But we're not out of the era of building your individual devotion to God. One thing that struck me when I was writing about Swamiji and having to really examine the quality of his life, when he was 36 years old in 1962, he was expelled from SRF, and I know I've said this up here before, but it's a very important point. He was penniless and friendless. He was back in his parents' house, sleeping in the bedroom there. He had nothing, but his life was given to Master. Swamiji has a very unique characteristic in his life. Since he became a disciple, except for a job he took for the Peace Corps, in which he thought he was going to teach the Peace Corps volunteers about Indian culture, he's never worked for any other cause except self-realization, ever. And that's what it is to be a disciple. Now, we've been asked to make communities. So we have construction companies, we make incense, we make suitcases, we do computer programming, we do all sorts of things now. But the whole context of it is we're all working for self-realization. We're making something for Master. And that is 100% the story of Ananda. The common sense of it isn't really there. Just like Ananda was speaking of, the common sense isn't there in a certain sense. What I mean to say is the practical common sense isn't there. But the deep common sense is there, and that common sense is we just do the best we can as disciples for Master and whatever is being asked of us with the talents that are given to us. And if each one of you do that, if each one of us continue to do that on an everyday basis, with that constant thought, the only signal that's going out from our heart is up to the tower, Lord, how can I help your work? And if it's making a business that, quote, seems unrelated, but in doing that, you provide the opportunity for others to be part of Ananda, you provide the example of dharmic business, You provide the example of creativity and devotion to God. You see, you can be very creative in your definition of this, of spiritual family life, whatever it might be. But in our hearts, we must always be acting as disciples. And if Swamiji has said, and you feel that you're one of those who someday must start a community, well, begin to make yourself ready. And maybe you're ready today to go somewhere and do it, but don't be presumptuous in your enthusiasm either. Make yourself ready, and how you make yourself ready is practice when it's easier, believe me. It's not possible to just step off the cliff unless you've had some idea already that you know how to fly. I asked Swami that question once, a very big, deep question. Sir, in this conundrum, how would I know what to do? I won't tell you the whole story, it's in my book. But his answer was, what you're asking is, how do you know what God wants in a great life-changing emergency? He said, you've practiced when it was easier. So a lot of times people say, oh, well, I know I'm supposed to be a healer. I know I'm supposed to be a leader in this. And, well, are you practicing? Are you practicing now, Dharma before desire, on an everyday, minute-to-minute basis? And honestly, everything else unfolds. There's that beautiful story about the young man who went to be a disciple of a master, and he had such a desire to learn. And the master put him outside to chop wood and carry water. And he just chopped wood and carried water because his guru never gave him another instruction. Disciples came and went, and all these things happened. And then one day, he looked into a pond, and he saw that he had grown old. And he saw that his had white beard, white hair. And he went to his guru weeping. He said, oh, I came here for spiritual realization, and all I've done is carry wood and chop water. And chop water. The master just touched him and turned him into a God-realized soul because he had put Dharma above desire. There is Dharma, there is victory. And for every single person, that's different. It would be presumptuous for me to stand here and say, you should do this, you should do that. Every person has that different, but there's also an absolute sameness. That doesn't mean life isn't fun. Swamiji was once asked, how much sacrifice is enough? He said that you can do joyfully. If you find that you're not really joyful, and I mean joyful on a deep level, not just comfortable, but deeply inside, this is the right thing. He said, then back up a little until it's a joyful self-offering to God. Martyrdom is not sainthood, but Dharma before desire. That's the whole story of Ananda, and it's been in our hands, and it will stay in our hands until the last breath leaves our body, and it's in every one of your hands, insofar as you've opened yourself to Master and said, take charge of my life. And then he will. Isn't that remarkable? He will. And 20 years from now at Ananda's 80th, or 40 years from now at Ananda's 80th, you too will be white-haired like some of the folks up here. And you'll be talking about all the dead founders of Ananda. And you'll be telling your stories with tears in your eyes, as we do. Because a life lived for God, what could be more glorious? Bless you.